New Jersey is known for a lot. Not all good things, but one good thing it is known for is its roller coasters. New Jersey has a very underrated collection of roller coasters, consisting of all the boardwalk parks, Great Adventure, and Nickelodeon Universe. But one coaster that doesn't seem to get talked about enough is GaleForce at Playland's Castaway Cove on the Ocean City Boardwalk. GaleForce is a multi-launch SNS roller coaster that initially opened in 2017, but in 2017 it opened as a bit of a disaster. It was constantly complained about that the ride was extremely rough, and this led to Playland's Castaway Cove having SNS pretty much completely rebuild the coaster for the 2018 season. All the track was replaced on GaleForce, and in 2018 it reopened and was met with rave reviews. It was said to be one of the most intense coasters out there, and later on in its life, it would actually wind up running through the course twice during one ride, which allowed you to get even more value out of the ride. I didn't get to ride GaleForce until 2021, but I have heard pretty good things about it. But all things considered, it really wasn't talked about as much as I would expect it to be, because when I rode GaleForce, I was blown away. This is by far one of the most intense coasters I have ever ridden, and truly is an underrated coaster. Let's start off by talking about what the ride looks like and how you get to it on the boardwalk. Playland's Castaway Cove, like I said, is situated in Ocean City, New Jersey. It is not too far away from Gillian's Wonderland Pier, but Gillian's really doesn't have anything on Playland's now. Playland's has 4 coasters, GaleForce being the headlining attraction of the park, and when you get to Playland's, it is a very, very tiny park, which is not easy to navigate because sometimes it can be absolutely jam-packed in there, especially on a crowded summer weekday or even weekend. It is not an easy park to navigate because it's so small. But GaleForce's entrance is located all the way to the right side of the park when looking at it from the ocean. One of the things I remember most about GaleForce's entrance and its queue is the fact that it is stuffed in a very tiny area. There's a lot of queue space in such a small area, which still is very surprising to me. And if you're there on a crowded summer day, don't be mistaken, it will get filled. GaleForce only runs one train by design, so it can get a bit of a long wait, but thankfully the operations of the ride are very quick. When I was there, it was $10 a ride, which, if you ask me, is a little steep for a boardwalk coaster. But I guess, to be fair to this park, this ride is probably not cheap to run, so they probably need all the money they can get out of it. When you first board GaleForce, you'll notice that the restraints are identical to the SNS free spin restraints, like on Joker. These restraints are relatively comfortable. One strange thing about the trains, though, is that you sit very low, so when you put your feet down, you're almost like squatting. It's a very strange position, but your feet really aren't locked in either, so you could like stick them out in front of you. It's a very strange restraint system, on top of the fact that there are 3 rows and 2 cars. The first 2 rows are attached, but then the back row is actually detached and its own car. I guess they did this because if they made it all one car, the articulation probably wouldn't work because the trains would be too bulky to actually navigate the course. So this is definitely an interesting design choice, but the back row and front row are both actually pretty different considering that there's only 3 rows on this ride. First, the gates will open up and you'll launch forward at a relatively slow speed. Then you'll launch backwards and get pretty far up that element, and then you're going to launch forwards, reaching a top speed of 64 miles an hour. You first fly up into this almost top hat-like element, and then you dive down at an extremely steep angle. I'm not sure exactly what the angle of descent is off of this element, but I know for sure that it's definitely beyond 90 because you get flung out of your seat going through this drop. From there, you're going to fly up and into this very twisty element that is sometimes called the kickflip. The reason for this is that you'll twist into it and then get absolutely thrown out of it. This is possibly the strongest moment of airtime on the ride, either this or the drop, and it's very, very intense. You feel yourself just go absolutely flying out of your seat. Then you'll enter a very reminiscent element of a Immelman. It's not really an Immelman, but it's kind of hard to describe all these elements because they really just bring you up pretty high and then twist you out. And there's another element right after this that sort of acts as like a dive loop. It's actually the element that brings you back down and into the station. Now, instead of stopping your ride here, you're actually going to get launched once again at full speed and go through the entire layout once more. Now, I don't know if this is statistically correct, but for my rides, it felt like we were going quite a bit faster the second time around. So I could be wrong there. I could just be the fact that I was so disoriented I couldn't tell what was going on, but it definitely felt faster going through the second time. Of course, once you complete your second lap around the layout, you will slow down and wind up stopping in the station. Like I said, GaleForce is a very, very intense ride, and truly, the most surprising thing about this ride is the fact that they were able to fit it into such a small space. You can't really tell from pictures, but when you're actually at Playland's Castaway Cove, it is pretty unbelievable that GaleForce was able to fit in such a tiny plot of land. When I say tiny, it's not even the size of a parking lot. It is so small, it's not even funny. And on top of that, they were able to wrap a full family coaster around the ride, which is, again, really, really cool. And Wild Waves is also a very fun ride. Overall, GaleForce is definitely a ride you need to get to ride. If you're going to Six Flags Great Adventure, I recommend taking the expedition down to Ocean City, even though it is a little out of the way, just to check out GaleForce because it's really that good. Ocean City is one of my favorite boardwalks in New Jersey. I've been to most of the major boardwalks in New Jersey, and I'd say this one is right up there as one of the top ones that I've been to. There's a lot to do other than just Playland's Castaway Cove, and there are a ton of food places, especially pizza places, so you're definitely going to have a whole lot to do there if you go check out Ocean City, New Jersey. And GaleForce is probably the highlight of the entire thing. It is just one of the most insane coasters I think I've ever ridden. If you need a comparison to how insane GaleForce is to a ride you may have ridden, think of positive G-forces and intensity on the level of King Ka. Maybe not quite on the level of King Ka, but pretty close, and airtime almost at the level of El Toro. It is that insane. I don't often feel very dizzy or like disoriented after a ride, but GaleForce is one of very few rides that actually left me very disoriented. Going through those airtime moments, you could feel the blood going right up to your head. It was that strong. The only other ride that I've ever felt that on was El Toro, and that was after multiple rides. This, one ride, and I felt it. It was unreal. Before the end of the video though, I do want to discuss the differences between the front row and the back row because there are a couple. The back row is definitely a little more shaky than the front row is, but it's really not something I would call rough. It's just more a little janky. It's really nothing bad. It's not rough by any means. You can definitely still enjoy it. You're not going to get a headache from it, unlike another coaster I know of. But the front row is definitely a little better in terms of the view, but the back row is more intense for the fact that you get pulled through those elements a little better. But the differences really aren't that major, so it doesn't matter where you wind up sitting if you're only getting one ride. If I had to pick one, I'd say try to shoot for back row because it's more intense, but if you want that really cool view and all of that, definitely go for the front row of GaleForce. But with that being said, that's going to conclude this video on what I think is New Jersey's most underrated coaster, GaleForce. If you guys agreed or enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next video.